there was a village where it hadn't rained in 2 years. The wells were dry. The fields were dust. The animals were dead. The children had stopped playing because playing requires energy and energy requires food and food requires rain and rain had forgotten this place existed. Then a stranger walked in. On foot. Alone. In the middle of the worst drought anyone could remember. He asked for water. Water. From a village that had none. And what happened over the next 3 days would be told for 100 years, not because of what happened to the sky, but because of what happened to the people beneath it. The village that forgot how to ask. Faraduma. Red village. Named for its soil, a deep iron-rich red that turned the hillsides beautiful when the rains came and wildflowers bloomed. 60 people. 3 families, the Abners, the Jorams, the Hadassahs, intermarried for generations until the whole village was one tangled, inseparable family. Was. Past tense. That's important. The drought split them. Not immediately. The first months were almost beautiful, the way crisis pulls people together. Shared meals. Shared water. Shared fear. They prayed together every evening, all 60 of them, on their knees in the square. Rabbi Eli led them, 80 years old, voice like worn leather, faith like bedrock. God hears us, Eli would say. The rain will come. It didn't come. And the sharing stopped before the praying did. It started small. Abner's wife hid a jar of oil in the back room. Not from greed, from fear. Just in case, she told herself. Joram saw it. He didn't say anything. He went home and hid his grain. The Hadassahs noticed the Joram's portions were smaller at the communal meals someone was holding back. So they held back too. Within 3 months, the long table in the square, the table where all 3 families had eaten together every Sabbath for as long as anyone could remember, was taken down. No one decided to take it down. It just happened. 1 week no one set it up. The next week no one mentioned it. The week after that, someone used the wood for cooking fuel. And the old wound opened. Every village has one. The wound that's been there so long people forget it's a wound, they think it's just the shape of things. In Faraduma, the wound had a name, the well. 20 years ago, Abner and Joram had fought over the well. Not the water, the land it sat on. Both families claimed it was theirs. The dispute was ugly. Words were said that cut deeper than any drought. Abner called Joram a thief. Joram called Abner a liar. Hadassah, grandmother Hadassah, the matriarch, stepped between them and brokered a peace. The well belongs to no family. It belongs to the village. Both men agreed. Both men shook hands. Neither man forgave. For 20 years they ate at the same table and prayed in the same synagogue, and their children married each other, and they never spoke of the well dispute, and they never let it go. It sat between them like a stone in a shoe, not painful enough to stop walking, too constant to forget. The drought turned the stone into a boulder. When the well started dying, when the water dropped from plentiful to scarce to desperate, the old accusation resurfaced. Joram claimed Abner was taking more than his share. Abner claimed Joram was sending his sons to draw water at night. Neither accusation was true. Both men believed the other capable of it. And the village fractured. Not into two, into 60 separate pieces. Because once suspicion enters a community, it doesn't divide, it atomizes. Suddenly everyone was watching everyone. Counting cups. Measuring portions. Locking doors that had never been locked. The praying stopped 6 months later. Not because of God. Because praying required gathering. And gathering required trust. And trust was the first thing the drought killed. Rabbi Eli prayed alone. Every evening. In the empty synagogue. His voice echoing off stone walls that used to hold 60 voices. One evening, Eli sat on the floor and said aloud, "Are you there?" Silence. "I don't need rain. I just need to know you hear me." Silence. And Eli, 80 years old, 60 years of ministry, the faith of a mountain, felt something he had never felt. Not doubt. Abandonment. The specific, terrible loneliness of a man talking to a God who used to answer and doesn't anymore. Grandmother Hadassah died on a Tuesday. She was 90. She had survived the last great drought 40 years ago, and everyone assumed she would survive this one. She was Kfar Aduma's anchor. When the families fought, she settled it. When the children were afraid, she told stories. When the well dispute happened, she was the one who said the well belongs to everyone, and both men listened, because not listening to Hadassah was like not listening to gravity. She stopped eating. Announced it at what passed for dinner, a thin broth, barely enough for the children. "I've lived enough. Feed the little ones." Her daughter tried to force her. Her granddaughter tried to trick her, hiding food in her tea. Hadassah smiled. Didn't eat. She had made a calculation, the cold, clear calculation of a woman who understood that math doesn't care about love. There wasn't enough food for everyone. Someone had to subtract themselves from the equation. She chose herself. She died in her sleep. The village buried her in the red dirt. The grave was easy to dig, the ground was so dry it crumbled like ash. After Hadassah, the village lost its center. She had been the reason the families still spoke. The reason the old wounds stayed closed. With her gone, nothing held them. Abner and Joram stopped speaking entirely. Their families followed. The village wasn't a village anymore. It was 60 people slowly dying in proximity. The stranger arrived on a Wednesday. Naomi saw him first. 10 years old. Abner's granddaughter, she was sitting at the edge of the village on a flat rock under the skeleton of a dead olive tree. Her usual spot. She had nothing to do. No school, Rabbi Eli was too tired. No chores, there was no water to carry. No play, the other children had retreated into the gray stillness. The figure appeared on the road, shimmering in the heat haze. Naomi squinted. A mirage, the desert played tricks. But this figure got closer. Someone's coming. The village gathered. 60 faces, hollow and wary. They watched the stranger stop 10 paces from the village edge. He was ordinary. Brown hair. Brown eyes. Somewhere between 30 and 35. Dusty clothes. Worn sandals. His hands were the only thing that stood out, the hands of someone who had worked and built and held things. Calloused but gentle. He smiled. Small. Quiet. The smile of a guest who knows he's arriving at a bad time. I've been walking a long time. Could I trouble you for some water? The word water landed like a slap. Abner stepped forward. His voice controlled. Barely. We have no water to give. The wells are dry. You'd be wise to keep walking. I know your wells are dry. Then why ask? Because I wanted to see what you'd say. Silence. You're hungry. Thirsty. Your animals are dead. Your fields are dust. Hadassah died 3 weeks ago because she gave her food to the children. Abner stiffened. How do you? And you stopped praying. The silence that followed was physical. Naomi could feel it pressing on her skin. You stopped because you decided God wasn't listening. You prayed for a year. Nothing changed. So you stopped. Rabbi Eli pushed forward. Who are you? The stranger looked at him. Something passed between them that Naomi couldn't read. Someone sent to a village that forgot how to ask. No one invited him. No one sent him away. He sat at the edge of the village under the dead olive tree and simply stayed. Naomi brought him water. Their smallest cup. 3 swallows. Brown. Muddy. The last of the morning ration. This is all we have. He took the cup in both hands. Held it the way you hold something precious. Do you know what this is? Water. Bad water. This is love. Your village has almost nothing. And you gave some of it to me. That's not water, Naomi. That's everything. He drank it. All of it. Thank you. And the way he said it made Naomi feel like she had given him a kingdom. The first day he did nothing. He sat. He watched. He talked to whoever came near, which was mostly Naomi. Where are you from? Far away. Are you going to make it rain? He picked up a handful of red soil. Let it sift through his fingers. What if the rain isn't the problem? But we need rain. Your ground dried from the inside first. Before the sky stopped giving, you stopped sharing. The drought started between you. The weather just agreed. The second day, he went to the well. The whole village watched. He leaned over the stone rim and looked into the darkness. Who built this well? Joram answered. My grandfather. 4 generations ago. Alone? No. Every family. 2 years. Even the children carried stones. Together. He looked at the gathered faces. When was the last time this village did something together? No one answered. You used to share meals. All 3 families. Every Sabbath. 1 long table. Abner's bread. Joram's wine. Hadassah's stew. The children running between tables. The old ones telling stories. He paused. When did you take the table down? Abner and Joram both looked at the ground. And the well. When it dried, did you try to dig deeper together? Silence. The drought dried your fields. But you dried each other. You stopped sharing meals. You stopped praying together. You stopped trusting. Each family retreated into its own house, its own fear, its own survival. and a village of one family became 60 strangers. Then he said something that cracked the village open: "Some of you are hiding food." Faces went white. Eyes darted. The specific, guilty flinch of people caught in something they'd convinced themselves was necessary. Not because you're selfish. Because you're afraid. And fear makes hoarders of us all. But hear me, every jar of oil hidden in a back room is a nail in this village's coffin. You will not survive this drought alone. None of you. You will survive it together or you will die apart. Joram broke first. Not with agreement, with anger. Easy for you to say. You walk in from nowhere with nothing to lose. We've been dying here for 2 years. You don't know what it's like to watch your children thin. You don't know what it's like to count cups of water and know there aren't enough. Don't stand at our well and lecture us about sharing. The stranger took it. He didn't flinch. He didn't argue. You're right, he said quietly. I walked in from nowhere. I have nothing to lose. And you have every reason not to trust a stranger. He looked at Joram. Directly. The way you look at someone when you're telling the truth and you need them to feel it. But you also have every reason not to trust each other. 20 years ago Abner called you a thief. You called him a liar. Hadassah stepped between you and said the well belongs to everyone. You both agreed. Neither of you forgave. Joram's face drained of color. Abner's hands clenched. And that unforgiveness, that stone in both your shoes, it was survivable when there was enough. When the wells were full and the fields were green, you could afford to not forgive. You could eat at the same table and pretend the wound was healed. But the drought stripped the pretending away. And what was underneath? Enough. Abner's voice. Low. Dangerous. The voice of a man whose deepest shame has been spoken aloud. You don't know what happened. You weren't there. I know that 2 stubborn men would rather let their village die than forgive each other. I know that 20 years of swallowed anger has poisoned this place worse than any drought. And I know that Hadassah, the woman who held you together, is gone. And with her gone, you need to hold each other. And you can't. Because you never forgave. Abner took a step toward the stranger. His fists were clenched. For a moment, a real, dangerous moment, Naomi thought her grandfather was going to hit him. You come into my village. You drink our water. And you throw our shame in our faces. Your shame is killing you faster than the thirst. Get out. The word echoed off the stone walls. The village held its breath. The stranger didn't move. He stood at the well, the disputed well, the wound's origin, and he absorbed Abner's rage the way the dry earth absorbs the first drops of rain. Without resistance. Without defense. I'll leave if you want me to, he said. But before I go, answer one question. Abner was shaking. With anger. With shame. With the exhaustion of a man holding a grudge so long his arms have forgotten they're carrying anything. Hadassah stopped eating so the children could live. She subtracted herself from the equation. She died for this village. The stranger's voice dropped. Can you forgive one man for this village? Hadassah gave her life. Can you give your pride? The silence lasted a long time. Naomi counted her heartbeats. She got to 47. Then Abner did something no one expected. He didn't forgive. Not yet. That would come. What he did was smaller and harder, the thing that makes forgiveness possible. He looked at Joram. For the first time in months, directly, without the sideways avoidance that had become habit. He looked at the man he had called a thief 20 years ago. And he saw, maybe for the first time, what the drought had done to him. Joram was thin. His hands trembled. His eyes were circled with the particular darkness of a man who lies awake calculating how many days his children can survive. Abner saw this. And something shifted. Not forgiveness, recognition. The recognition that the man across from him was not the enemy. The drought was the enemy. The pride was the enemy. And they had been fighting each other while the real enemy consumed them both. Abner's fists unclenched. He didn't speak. He turned and walked to his house. The crowd parted. He disappeared inside. Naomi's heart sank. He was done. He had retreated. The wall was. Abner came back out. He was carrying something. A jar. A large clay jar that Naomi recognized. It had been in the back room, behind the grain sacks, hidden. She had seen her grandmother hide it months ago. Oil. Olive oil. Enough for weeks. Abner walked to the center of the village. He set the jar down in the dust. He didn't look at the stranger. He didn't look at Joram. He looked at the ground. "I've been hiding this," he said. His voice was thick. "Since the 5th month." The silence changed. The accusation the stranger had made, "Some of you are hiding food," was no longer abstract. It was a jar of oil in the dust. It was real. It was shameful. And Abner had just put his shame in the center of the village for everyone to see. Joram stared at the jar. Stared at Abner. And Naomi watched something move across his face. First anger, I knew it. He was hoarding. Then guilt because under Joram's own bed was a sack of grain. Then something else. Something that looked like the beginning of tears. Joram went inside his house. He came back with grain. A sack. Not large but not nothing. He set it beside the oil. He looked at Abner. Their eyes met for the first time in months, without accusation. Without defense. Two men standing over their hidden provisions, exposed, ashamed, and somehow lighter. Sarah brought lentils. The last of them. Someone brought dried figs. Someone brought herbs. One family brought a pomegranate, a single pomegranate, somehow still intact, hoarded for a day that never came. One by one. Family by family. The hidden things came out. The back rooms emptied. The secret stores became public. The shame of hoarding transformed into the relief of confession. And someone no one remembered who dragged out the pieces of the old table. The Sabbath table. The wood was rough, some of it partly burned from when it had been used as fuel. But the planks were there. And someone found the legs. And slowly, clumsily, with hands that hadn't worked together in 2 years, they rebuilt it. The meal was that night. 60 people. One table. Under the stars. The stranger sat somewhere in the middle. Naomi beside him. Rabbi Eli across from him. Abner and Joram 3 seats apart, not next to each other, not ready for that, but at the same table. At the same table. The food was placed in the center. Stew from the lentils. Bread from the grain. Oil. Figs. The single pomegranate, cracked open, its seeds glistening like rubies. It wasn't enough. Naomi could do the math. 60 people. This much food. The numbers didn't work. The stranger reached for the bread. Held it in both hands. Closed his eyes. Thank you. 2 words. Spoken upward. To someone the village had stopped speaking to. Not a formal prayer. Not a liturgy. Just thank you. From a man holding bread in a starving village. He broke it. Passed it. And here is where Naomi's story becomes the story she would tell for the rest of her life. Everyone ate. She watched. She watched with the eyes of a 10-year-old who could count and measure and who knew with certainty that the stew pot was small. That the bread was a few loaves at most. That the figs were a handful. And everyone ate. Not a bite each. Not a taste. Full portions. Seconds. Children going back for more and finding more to go back for. Naomi looked at the stew pot twice. 3 times. She counted the loaves on the table. She watched the bread basket travel from hand to hand and never empty. Nobody said anything, nobody pointed. Nobody asked how. They just ate. And the eating, the sharing, the passing, the here, take more was itself a kind of weeping. A communal release. 2 years of locked doors and hidden jars and suspicious glances dissolving in the simple act of passing bread. And then someone laughed. Amos. 6 years old. He laughed at something another child said, a small thing, a silly thing. But the sound of a child laughing in a village that had forgotten laughter cracked the night open. The laugh spread. Face to face. Table to table. Until 60 people were laughing and no one could explain why and no one needed to. And somewhere in the middle of it, between the laughter and the bread and the tears, Abner stood up. The table quieted. He walked to where Joram sat. He stood over him. Joram looked up. Their eyes met. I called you a thief, Abner said. 20 years ago. At this well. You were not a thief. You were my brother. And I've wasted 20 years pretending otherwise. He extended his hand. Joram looked at it. Looked at Abner's face. And the dam, a different dam, older than the drought, deeper than the well, broke. Joram stood. He didn't take Abner's hand. He embraced him. And the whole village broke with them. 20 years of accumulated silence and suspicion and swallowed words and locked doors, all of it crashing down at once. People were crying. People were holding each other. Naomi was sobbing into her grandmother's shoulder and her grandmother was sobbing into hers, and somewhere in the chaos Rabbi Eli had his face in his hands and his shoulders were shaking, and the stranger was sitting quietly. Not eating. Naomi realized later that she never saw him eat. The last piece of bread on his plate, he had passed it to the child beside him without taking a bite. He was watching the village rebuild itself. And his face held something Naomi would spend 50 years trying to name. Not happiness exactly. Not pride. Something deeper. The expression of someone watching a thing they love become what it was always meant to be. The third morning, the stranger walked to the dead olive tree, Naomi's tree. He placed his hand on the trunk. The village gathered. Not because anyone called them, because the gathering was now automatic. Natural. The way it had been before. You stopped praying because you believed God stopped listening, the stranger said. But God didn't stop. God was waiting. For what, Eli? For you to stop handing God a list and start asking what he sees. The village was quiet. For 2 years you prayed, give us rain. That's not prayer. That's a demand. You wanted God to fix the sky while you broke each other. You wanted water from above while your wells between each other ran dry. He turned to Naomi. A girl gave me water when her village had none. That cup, that small, muddy cup, was the most powerful prayer I've heard in 2 years, because it wasn't words. It was hands. It wasn't asking God for something. It was being God for someone. He looked at the table. Still standing. Stew stains and bread crumbs and the evidence of 60 people becoming a family again. Last night you brought everything you had. Not because you had enough. Because you didn't. You shared from scarcity. You gave from emptiness. That is faith. Not asking for rain from a comfortable house. Pouring out your last oil for your neighbor. He stepped back from the tree. Now pray. Not for rain. For each other. For forgiveness to finish what it started last night. For the table to never come down. Pray for the thing that matters and let God handle the sky. Rabbi Eli walked to the center of the village. His legs were unsteady. His hands were shaking. But his eyes were different. The flickering was gone. Something had caught. Something was burning. He lowered himself to his knees. In the red dust. In front of everyone. And he wept. That was his prayer. Not words. Weeping. The sound of a man releasing 2 years of doubt and the terrible weight of talking to a God who seemed to have left the room. Abner knelt. Then Joram beside Abner, shoulder to shoulder, 2 men who had wasted 20 years and were not going to waste another minute. Then Sarah. Then the children. Naomi knelt. Amos knelt. All 60. On their knees in the dust. They prayed without words. With presence. With the act of being together on the ground. The way their grandparents had built the well together, every family, even the children carrying stones. The stranger stood among them. Hand on the olive tree. Eyes closed. And Naomi kneeling, watching through wet eyes, saw something on his face she hadn't seen before. Strain. Not peace. Not calm. Not the serene certainty he had carried since arriving. His jaw was tight. His hand on the tree was pressed hard, knuckles white. A tendon in his neck stood out. His lips were moving, not speaking, not whispering, something more private than that. He was praying too. And his prayer was costing him something. For the first time, the stranger looked like a man carrying something heavy. And for the first time, Naomi wondered, what does it cost to carry a village? The prayer ended. People stood. Brushed off their knees. looked at the sky. Blue. Empty. Not a cloud. An hour passed. Nothing. 2 hours. The sun climbed. The heat returned. The dust blew. 3 hours. The sky was blank. Merciless. Mockingly blue. Naomi watched the faces. The hope that had built during the prayer, fragile, newborn, barely alive, was thinning. She could see it draining from face to face. The old despair creeping back. The familiar weight resettling on shoulders that had briefly lifted. Joram said it first. Quietly. Not to the crowd, to himself, but loud enough that others heard. Nothing. The word spread like poison. We prayed. Nothing changed. The stranger said pray and God would. God doesn't hear us. We said this. We knew this. Abner turned to the stranger. His face was hardening. The tenderness from last night calcifying back into the armor he had worn for 2 years. You told us to pray. We prayed. Where is your God? The stranger was leaning against the olive tree. He looked tired. Not the refreshed calm of the previous days. Tired. Genuinely tired. As if the prayer had drained something from him. I said pray for each other. Not for rain. What good is each other if we're dead? What good is rain if you're strangers? Rain keeps us alive. No. The stranger's voice was quiet, but it cut through Abner's shout like a blade through cloth. Last night kept you alive. The table kept you alive. Abner putting his oil in the center kept you alive. Joram embracing the man who called him a thief kept you alive. Amos laughing kept you alive. The rain. He stopped. Closed his eyes. Pressed his hand harder against the tree. That strain again on his face. That cost. The rain is not mine to command. I am asking. I don't demand. I ask. Naomi felt something cold run through her. For the first time the stranger was uncertain. For the first time the outcome was not guaranteed. He was not a magician pulling rain from a sleeve. He was a man with his hand on a dead tree, asking. And the sky was still blue. The afternoon was the worst. People retreated to their houses. The hope hangover, the crash that follows belief that doesn't immediately produce results, was devastating. Worse than before. Because before, they had expected nothing. Now they had expected something. And nothing is more crushing than disappointed hope. Old Tobias 75, quiet, the kind of man who survived by needing very little, collapsed at the well. Dehydration. His wife screamed. People came running. They carried him into the shade. Poured the last rationed water on his lips. He didn't wake up. Tobias died at 3 in the afternoon. In the shade of a stone wall. His wife holding his hand. The village gathered around, and the despair, the old familiar despair, settled back on them like a cloak made of iron. The stranger was there. Standing at the edge of the circle around Tobias. And his face, Naomi watched his face, was not serene. Not calm. Not wise. It was anguished. He was looking at Tobias's body with an expression that Naomi recognized because she had seen it on her grandfather's face at grandmother Hadassah's grave. Grief. Real, human, unprotected grief. The stranger's hands were trembling. Naomi had never seen that. In 3 days of quiet confidence and gentle smiles and perfect words, she had never seen his hands shake. He turned away from the circle, walked to the olive tree, and he did something no one expected. He pressed both hands against the dead trunk, not gently, not reverently. He pressed as if trying to push through it. His forehead dropped against the bark. His shoulders hunched. His body curved inward, and Naomi heard him whisper. Not to the village. Not to anyone visible. Please. Not for me. For them. They came back to each other. They prayed. They forgave. Please. Don't let this be for nothing. The words were cracked. Desperate. The voice of someone who had brought a village to its knees and watched them rise and was now watching them fall again and was running out of strength to hold them up. I know you hear me. I know your timing is not mine. But Tobias is dead and the sky is empty and they're breaking again, and I'm asking. His voice broke. I'm asking. Naomi stood 5 feet away. She heard every word. And for the first time in the entire 3 days, she understood something about the stranger. He wasn't performing. He wasn't certain. He was asking. The same way Rabbi Eli had asked. The same way the village had asked. The same way she had asked every night for 2 years, lying on her mat, staring at the ceiling, whispering please into the dark. The stranger was one of them. Whatever he was, prophet, teacher, something more, he was also a man pressing his forehead against a dead tree and begging. And Naomi did something she would never be able to explain. She walked to him. She put her hand on his arm. Small hand. 10 years old. It's okay, she said. Even if it doesn't rain. The table is still standing. The stranger looked down at her. His eyes were red. Wet. His face was the face of a man holding something too heavy with arms that were shaking. And Naomi, without thinking, without planning, without understanding what she was doing, said, "Thank you for coming. Even if nothing else happens. You came. That's enough." The cloud appeared at 4. Naomi didn't see it first this time. Amos did. The 6-year-old who had laughed last night. He was standing on a wall. Children climb everything, and he shouted, "Look! West! On the horizon! A smudge! Gray-white! Small enough to be nothing." No one reacted. They had seen clouds before. Clouds that teased. Clouds that passed over without dropping a single grain of moisture. Clouds that mocked. But this one didn't pass. It grew. Slowly at first. Then faster. Other clouds joined it, rolling in from the sea, piling on top of each other. The sky that had been blank blue for 2 years was changing. Gray. Darker gray. The deep bruised purple that means one thing. Wind. Cool wind. So shocking after 2 years of dry heat that people gasped. Cool air on faces that had forgotten what cool felt like. Carrying moisture. Carrying the smell that smell. The smell that people in dry lands know in their marrow. The smell of rain. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 60 people standing in a dying village looking at a sky that was turning dark for the first time in 2 years. The first drop hit the dust. A single dark circle in the pale red dirt. Small. Almost invisible. Then another. 3 feet away. Then another. Naomi held out her hand. Palm up, and a drop, a single, fat, cold drop hit the center of her palm. "It's real," she whispered. "It's real." And the sky opened. Not a drizzle. Not a mist. A downpour. Water falling in sheets. In walls. In cascading, drenching, impossible abundance. The kind of rain that turns dust to mud in seconds. The kind that fills your mouth if you look up. The kind that runs down your face and your arms and soaks through everything until you can't tell where the rain ends and your skin begins. 5 seconds of silence. Then the scream. 60 voices at once. Not a word. A sound. The sound a village makes when it has been dying for 2 years and suddenly the sky remembers them. Children ran with mouths open. Women held out pots, jars, cups, anything. Men stood with arms spread and faces turned up, letting it hammer them, letting it soak them, letting it wash 2 years of dust and death off their bodies. Rabbi Eli fell to his knees in the mud. Not in prayer this time. In laughter. 80 years old, on his knees in the mud, laughing like a child. Rain pouring down his face and into his open mouth, and he was laughing. Abner grabbed Joram and they held each other, 2 old enemies standing in the rain, holding on, weeping, the water washing something off them that was older and dirtier than dust. Naomi danced. Her body decided. Her feet moved in the mud, splashing, sliding, and she was laughing and crying simultaneously, and the rain was in her mouth and it tasted like the best thing she had ever tasted in her entire 10 years of life. She looked for the stranger. He was at the olive tree. In the rain. Not celebrating. Both hands on the trunk. Eyes closed. Rain pouring down his face. And the tree. Naomi saw it. She would swear it for the rest of her life. Where his hands pressed against the trunk, green. A shoot. Small as a finger. Pushing through dead gray bark the way a fist pushes through paper. Then another. Then another. Green erupting from dead wood. Buds forming, swelling, opening, not in days, not in hours, in minutes. Leaves unfurling wet and bright against the rain-dark bark. The dead tree was alive. Naomi stopped dancing. She stood in the rain and watched the tree come back to life under the stranger's hands, and she understood in the way that children understand things, not with the mind but with the whole body, that what she was watching was not about weather. The rain was for the fields. The tree was for her. The tree was the stranger saying, "Dead things come back. Lost things return. The thing you thought was over, it's not." He left the next morning. The rain had stopped overnight. The clouds remained fat and gray, promising more. The wells were already showing water at the bottom, just inches, but real. Visible. The sky reflected in the darkness. The village gathered. Wet clothes drying. Mud on every foot. Something on every face that hadn't been there 4 days ago. The table was standing in the square, no one had taken it down. No one would. Naomi brought a cup. The same small clay cup from the first day. But this time clear water. Clean. New rain. For your journey. He took it. Both hands. That same reverence. He drank. The first time you gave me water, I called it love. Do you remember? Yes. This time it's not love. This time it's faith. You gave from nothing and called it love. Now you give from abundance and call it rain. But it was always the same thing. He handed the cup back. Looked at the village. At the table. At Eli, standing taller. At Abner and Joram, side by side. At the olive tree green, impossibly green, leaves trembling in the morning breeze. Don't let the table come down. The rain will come and go. Seasons will turn. Droughts will return. But if the table stays, you'll survive anything. He turned to leave. Walked down the road. Red mud now, not red dust. Naomi called after him. Will you come back? He didn't turn around. But his voice carried clear and warm in the wet morning air. I never left. Years passed. The rains returned. The wells filled. The fields turned green. Wildflowers covered the hillsides each spring. The table stayed. Every Sabbath. Every feast. Every ordinary day when someone felt like cooking. The table stayed. And every year, on the anniversary, they set an extra place. An empty chair. A cup of clean water. Naomi grew old. Married. Had children. Grandchildren. She became the storyteller. And every time a child tugged her sleeve tell us about the stranger, she began the same way. A man asked for water in a village that had none. And we gave it to him. And he gave us everything. Was he a prophet, grandmother? Naomi would look at the olive tree, thick with leaves now, heavy with fruit, its canopy shading the table where the whole village still ate together. He was the rain, she would say. We thought we needed water from the sky. But the water we needed was already here. In us. Between us. We had just forgotten how to pour. But was he God? Naomi would smile. He asked for water. I gave him a cup of mud. And he called it love. She would touch the bark of the olive tree. That scene where dead meets living, where old wood becomes new. You tell me, what kind of man does that? The children never had an answer. But they never forgot the question. Shall we continue?